Former G4S employee and a 65-year-old man have appeared in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court today in connection with the prison escape of fugitive, murderer and rapist Thabo Bester. The 65-year-old suspect is believed to be the father of Bester's companion and partner, Nandipha Magudumana. SABC News reporter Aphumelele Mdlalane is tracking that story and joins us live. Very good afternoon to you, Aphumelele. Take us through what happened in court earlier today.
Well, it was just a brief appearance as expected, though it was delayed and it took long to be the proceedings to continue. But what we have now, we know that the case has been postponed to the 17th of April for bail application. But also what's interesting is that more charges have been added for the accused. We know that they are now facing charges of murder, defeating the ends of justice, fraud. Those are just some of the charges. But I just want to bring now Machini Mutlong, the legal expert, just to take us through to the charges. Initially, Ndate, the charges that we knew about was the abetting as well as the aiding of the convicted Bester. But now we see the subsecution thereof. Can you take us through that?
Look, it's also, taken everyone by surprise, particularly if one looks at the background details pertaining to their arrest. The details are quite clear and succinct that there is a prisoner who escaped from lawful custody, and the allegations that follows through is that the prisoner was assisted or there was conspiration to assist him to escape from lawful custody. But the turn of events, and remember that the state, the prosecution, is dominus litis, so they are the master of the lawsuit. They determine which charges should be preferred against an accused person, and this is by and large, dependent on the contents of the docket. It could be, and this is just mere speculation, that there may be evidence that may suggest that such charges should be added, But from where I am, as indicated earlier, if you look into Section 21 of PRECA, for instance, which deals specifically with aiding, assisting, commanding a person or another person to escape from lawful custody, that amounts to corruption. It may, to a large extent, amount to fraud, depending on the documents which could have been made or which could have been completed in the release of this person. Perhaps when you look at fraud and you look into Section 115, it's very expansive in that, among others, if you complete documents with misleading information which may lead to a person being released unlawfully, that also amounts to aiding. But what is of interest is that abandoning aiding completely, in a way, it throws a spanner in the works. But obviously, as I indicated, the state is dominus litis. They would determine the charges based on the contents of the docket.
Interesting enough, there's also a charge of murder, and we know already that the investigation has been conducted. We know that was a corpse in the cell. Where is murder being linked here?
Look, this is what is in the public domain, that whatever body that was there, what was found to have been burnt beyond recognition, it's a body that came there, was planted into the cell, having, which was lifeless. This is what we have in the public domain. One wouldn't really know what is contained in the docket. What would then come out of the charges of murder would, in a way, insinuate that there is someone who was still alive at the time when this incident took place, of burning the very same cell where allegedly where Thabo Bester was occupying. So what is coming to the fore, it would appear that a live body or a body of a living person was inside the cell, perhaps, because otherwise you can't charge a person with murder if there was a lifeless body, which is in the public domain, that a lifeless body was planted in that police cell, which in that cell, prison cell, which was later, set alight. Hence the charge of arson, which in my view, it's logical to charge a person with arson if there was a setting alight of a property.
And earlier on, you did also try to allude on the fact of the corpses that were missing, of course, 3 missing in one of the mortuaries. Take us through again to that act as a result to what has transpired there, now that there's a charge of murder.
Look, if you are fiddling with a corpse, with a dead body, that's an unlawful act. Particularly if you're not doing so for purposes of post-mortem or any other lawful purposes. If you are seen to be violating a corpse, that on its own amounts to a criminal offense. And one, if is found guilty of such an offense, on conviction you will be liable to a fine or a prison term. And in this instance, it would appear that there is no one would have anticipated that there will be a charge of violating a corpse, against the backdrop of what is playing out in the public domain, which is that a corpse was planted in that prison cell and which was then burnt beyond recognition. But a turn of events suggests otherwise, that this was not a lifeless body, and it's now up to the state to prove such and substantiate such allegations beyond reasonable doubt by leading evidence that may suggest that indeed it was not a corpse that was planted in the prison cells, but rather someone who was still alive and who was then killed in that moment.
Well, that is Mr. Machini Mudlalane keeping us up to speed, breaking down the charges that the GIO are facing. As I did indicate now that they have substituted the charges of aiding and abetting to murder, defeating the ends of justice, fraud, arson. And we know that the 65-year-old's, the name, it's Zolile Sekeleni, who is the father of Dr. Nandipha, and the second, of course, accused is Sinohe Matware, who is the former G4S employee. We know that this former G4S employee will be in custody in Brantford. We understand that it's because he was working at the correctional service here in Mangaung. Therefore, they are saying that he cannot be in the custody that he was working at. And also, with the 65-year-old will be in custody in Bainsflay until they appear for formal bail application on the 17th of April.